Andrew, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your expertise because you've actually been to these conferences and you can share with me, based on your coverage. You know, I've seen some of your coverage and you called it a billionaire's Disneyland. What's that all about?
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note there's a lot going on here. And on one end of the spectrum, you have people that believe it's this sinister, evil cabal of puppet masters controlling the world from the Swiss mountains. And on the other end, you have these true believers that believe that when everyone in the world that is in this elite category gets together, they can solve the world's problems. And you have another camp that says, yeah, it's just kind of a little sham thing. But the one thing that I do feel is fairly universally accepted is that it's the place where the elites go because they feel they get something out of it. And when you walk around this little town, there's almost this novelty to it. There are places that are giving out free hot chocolate from Facebook or the United Arab Emirates, or you can get samosas handed out by some Indian billionaire's little hut, and all of these different pavilions that are set up. And it is this weirdly safe space for the world's elites.
So what actually happens at the conferences? Because again, there's like the WEF, this organization, and they put on this conference. So maybe we should even dial it back further. What is the WEF, the World Economic Forum?
So in its own words, the World Economic Forum is an organization that fosters public-private partnerships. So they bring business leaders together with political leaders, and they do this to solve the world's problems head on. Now, the flip side of that is that this is an unelected private sector group that has no legitimate authority emanating from anywhere. There's not any official oversight or governance that is coming back to any elected government. The influence exists because people have, over the last 50 years, decided to let the organization wield influence. So when you go to these conferences, there are two sort of tracks that are taking place. On one side, there's the official program, all of these sessions and speeches, most of which are publicly live streamed, so you can watch them. But then there's also this shadow United Nations aspect of it here, where behind closed doors, you have these multilateral meetings, these bilateral meetings, sit downs between heads of government, heads of state, and business leaders that are never really publicly acknowledged.
And why is that a concern if they're not publicly acknowledged? Like if global leaders, like I believe our Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was there, if she's having a meeting with her counterpart from, say, Sweden, why is that a concern if it's off the books, if you will?
Well, I think it depends on what's being discussed, and it depends on why it's off the books, because there is this whole network of global diplomats, of a global foreign service that exists to engage in diplomacy. We have the COP summits for United Nations climate talks. We have treaty negotiations. We have all of these other things. So the question is, why do we need this shadow organization doing it? Why do we need this private sector group? And I think it's particularly problematic when you start talking about business leaders, because we have a lot of regulations in Canada and in other Western democracies on lobbying and on cash for access fundraisers, because we don't want the idea of our politicians being for sale. Well, business leaders are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to the World Economic Forum annual meeting. Politicians are not paying at all. They're there for free. And it's because they're the product being sold. It's because business leaders are paying to get access to these politicians. So I think anyone should want to know what's in it for them. Why are they getting something out of that?
You know, that's a very interesting point that you brought up, and I want to talk about it after the break. Are politicians who attend these events, are we basically setting them up for breaking the Lobbying Registry Act? We're going to discuss this and a lot more in just a few moments.